My son blocked the doorway of my own house with both hands. "Dad, you can't go in there. Amanda's family is here." I stood frozen on my own porch, staring at the boy I'd raised, as if I were a stranger trying to break in. 10 minutes earlier, I'd left work early to grab some files from my home office. I heard laughter drifting through the door before I even got my key in the lock. Amanda, my daughter-in-law, and her parents, celebrating something. The lock clicked. The door opened halfway. Then Ryan shot into the gap and threw his whole body against it, sealing it shut, looking at me like I was the intruder. Welcome to Dad's Real-Life Revenge. I'm David Halverson. Grab a drink, get comfortable, and if this story pulls you in, drop a 1 in the comments and hit subscribe, because it's about to get worse before it gets better. I sat in my truck afterward, staring at my own hands. 31 years of calluses from maintaining the city's water systems, and they were shaking. Not from cold, from humiliation. My 2-story brick house sat there in the dusk, still mine on paper, no longer mine in practice. My son had looked at me and found nothing, no respect, just a wall. 31 years of inspecting pressure systems taught me one thing. When something's leaking, you don't shout. You go quiet, trace it to the source, and shut the valve. So I didn't argue with Ryan. I pulled my key out of the lock and walked back to my truck. He watched me go, and I understood, sitting there in the rearview mirror, that the foundation of my house had already rotted from the inside, and the person holding the wrecking ball was the daughter-in-law who knew exactly how Carol liked her coffee. I drove to see Gary, my oldest friend, a retired mechanical engineer who could spot a hairline crack in steel with his bare eyes. I told him everything, the door, Ryan's face, the coldness. He listened, tapping his fingers on the table, then asked quietly, "Are you sure there weren't warning signs?" There were. Amanda always knew things she shouldn't have had to learn. How Carol took her coffee. When I needed a warm towel after a late shift. I'd once been proud of that attentiveness. Now it felt like reconnaissance. She was a legal assistant, sharp enough to find the loopholes an ordinary person would never notice. I didn't go home that night. I parked across the street in the dark and watched my own living room through the window. Amanda's parents were still there, and on the table between them sat a document, the distinct blue of legal paper. My stomach dropped. I remembered an email from Umpqua Bank the week before, about changes to our family trust account, which I'd dismissed as a glitch. Watching that blue document catch the lamplight, I understood I'd been wrong. When the house finally went dark, and Ryan and Amanda went up to bed, I let myself in the back door. My office still smelled like their expensive dinner. I opened my email and searched for that bank notice. A new co-owner had been added to Carol's and my joint savings account, Amanda Halverson. Reason listed, POA, power of attorney. I had never signed anything like that. It required a notarized signature, used only when the account holder was incapacitated or chose to delegate. I was neither. Then I remembered our trust's fine print, a clause letting either primary trustee's signature temporarily appoint an emergency co-trustee. Amanda hadn't gone after Carol. She'd gone after me, because she knew I ran our finances. I thought about 3 months earlier, when Ryan had asked me for a large loan, claiming their restaurant, Copper Skillet, was having minor difficulties. I'd said no. That money was Carol's retirement. He'd stormed out. Now I logged into a business credit database and found the truth. Copper Skillet was hemorrhaging $11,000 a month, buried in unpaid invoices, one step from bankruptcy. Amanda needed money, a lot of it, and she'd decided to hunt inside her own husband's family. I remembered the hidden security camera on the bookshelf, installed years ago for when Carol and I traveled, something Ryan never knew existed. I pulled up footage from 3 days earlier. At 10 in the morning, while Carol and I were at work, the front door opened. Amanda walked in with a man in a gray suit carrying a briefcase. They sat at my dining table. She spread out a stack of documents, pointed to clauses, then signed with a firm, practiced stroke. The man pulled out a notary seal and pressed it into the page like it was nothing. I sat with that for a long moment. Then I started connecting the rest. Ryan's sudden curiosity about our trust, his questions about who'd control things if something happened, to his parents, which I'd mistaken for a son growing thoughtful. the bank and county letters that had mysteriously stopped arriving. And one night 2 months back, overhearing Amanda on the balcony, thinking I was asleep, "The 6-month plan is right on schedule. Let them think everything's fine. Once the paperwork's done, they won't have any legal standing." At the time I'd assumed she meant a case at her firm. She hadn't been talking about a case. She'd been talking about us. At 8:30 the next morning I walked into Umpqua Bank and demanded to see the original power of attorney. The account manager, Sarah, pulled the file and slid it across the desk. My name was on the signature line, in ink that looked, at a glance, remarkably like mine. Amanda had clearly studied it for years, but I ran my finger over the capital D. My D always curls left at the base, a habit from my younger days in the military. This one curled the wrong way, too smooth, too careful, someone else's hand pretending to be mine. I told Sarah flatly, "This is a forgery." She went pale, called in the bank's legal and security teams, and I photographed both sides of the document before walking out. From there I went straight to the county recorder's office to meet Rebecca Voss, an asset fraud attorney, and old friend of Gary's. I showed her the forged signature and the notary seal, a man named Robert Vance. She ran the name through the state database and went very still. Robert Vance had died 6 months earlier. His notary license had been revoked. That seal should have been destroyed. Amanda hadn't just forged my signature. She'd used a dead man's seal to legitimize it, betting, correctly, that a bank clerk checks for a seal's presence, not its validity, unless someone complains. Rebecca leaned back and said what I already knew. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This was first-degree fraud and identity theft. She slid a blank authorization across the desk. I signed it, my D curling exactly where it should, and told her to start the counterattack. Subpoenas to Amanda's law firm and to Umpqua Bank, freezing every account tied to the forged POA, pulling the original paperwork and surveillance footage. Then she told me to go home and act like nothing had happened. We needed time for the trap to close. The next 6 weeks were the hardest of my life. I went to work. Carol cooked dinner. Amanda still dropped by with that same warm smile, and every time she walked through the door, I saw a dead man's notary seal stamped invisibly across her forehead. I told Carol everything, the D that curved the wrong way, the forged seal, all of it. She didn't cry. She went quiet, then said, standing at the sink with Amanda's coffee cup in her hand, she remembered exactly how I take my coffee, and forged my husband's signature the same year. I almost have to admire her. From that moment, Amanda wasn't family to us anymore. She was an intruder we were finally ready to remove. Rebecca worked fast. Amanda's law firm launched its own internal investigation after her subpoena landed, and found Amanda had been quietly using firm resources, client lists, legal forms, even old notary seals, for her own purposes. Umpqua Bank froze our trust account under court order. Amanda and Ryan had no idea any of it was happening. They were still waiting for a payday that would never come. Every night I watched the camera footage, Amanda checking our mailbox, making anxious phone calls as the money failed to materialize. The trap was fully built. It just needed a trigger. If you're still with me, drop a 5 in the comments and tell me your city. It helps more than you'd think. The trigger came on a Friday. Rebecca called. Every order was signed, every account frozen, every piece of evidence locked down. That same week, Amanda, still oblivious, called Carol to invite herself and her parents back for a Saturday family breakfast, promising a big surprise. She had no idea what surprise was actually waiting. Saturday morning was gray. I sat at the dining table with the case file Rebecca had delivered the night before. Amanda's family arrived just like 6 weeks earlier, laughing on their way in, until Amanda saw Carol and me already seated, and no breakfast on the table, just silence, heavy as a held breath. Ryan tried to reclaim the room. "Dad, I told you, Amanda's family needs to talk. You and Mom should go for a walk." I didn't stand. I opened the file and looked at my son. "Ryan, this is my house. The person who needs to leave is your wife." Amanda recovered her smile fast. "Dad, I don't know what you're talking about. I've always taken care of this family." I slid the forged power of attorney across the table, followed by Robert Vance's death record and the bank's freeze order. "This is how you take care of it?" Forging my signature? Using a dead man's notary seal to steal from our trust? Her face drained white, then flushed red. Her parents' hands trembled as they read. Ryan stared at the wrong curving D and turned on his own wife. Amanda, what is this? You told me this was legal. He wasn't shocked by the forgery. He was shocked at being caught. Amanda wasn't the type to take the fall alone, and she looked at me with pure venom. What's wrong with what I did? I was protecting this family. You're both old. What do you need that money for? Ryan's your only son. It was going to be his anyway. I just sped things up. Carol stood, looked at her with open contempt. You weren't protecting this family. You were protecting your greed. I dialed the number already saved in my phone. When a system leaks, you shut the valve. When the law's been broken, you call the police. Tell me in the comments, does someone who hides fraud behind the word family deserve forgiveness? Sirens grew louder down the street. Amanda lunged for the file. Ryan grabbed her before she could reach it. The front door opened and 3 officers walked in with a warrant. As the cuffs closed around her wrists, Amanda screamed at Ryan. You think I did this alone? You handed me the trust documents. You gave me the mailbox key. You signed the restaurant's loss reports yourself. The room went dead silent. Ryan stood frozen, white as paper, and couldn't meet my eyes. That silence was the only confession I needed. He'd known, or looked away hard enough not to have to. I told the officer to take her, and to follow the law exactly where Ryan was concerned. Amanda was led out past the neighbors gathering on the lawn. Her parents followed, heads down. In the house, it was just Carol, Ryan, and me. He dropped to his knees, crying, begging forgiveness, blaming the debt, claiming Amanda told him it was just a loan. Carol didn't even look at him. She walked into the kitchen and left him there. Her silence was harsher than anything either of us could have said. The case moved fast after that. Amanda was charged with first-degree forgery and identity theft, fired immediately, her legal certification revoked for good. Copper Skillet went bankrupt and was seized to cover its debts. She got 5 years probation, she had a young child, and was ordered to repay every dollar of our legal costs. Her career was over. Ryan, since he hadn't personally forged anything or known about the dead man's seal, avoided charges, but he lost his wife, his business, and every ounce of trust his parents had ever placed in him. A few days later, Gary showed up on my porch with a new lock set. I unscrewed the old one myself, years of dust falling off hardware that had once meant safety and clearly hadn't been enough. I installed the new lock, turned the key, heard it click into place. My house was secure again, but the peace of it tasted like loss. Ryan stood on the lawn, in the shade of the old oak, not daring to step onto the porch. He knew what the new key in my hand meant. I handed him a bag with some clothes and the last of his things from the house, and I told him, as steady as I could, "You're my son, Ryan. I can forgive you as a father, but I can't trust you as the owner of this house. Trust isn't given. It's rebuilt, starting from nothing. Now go take responsibility for what you did." He nodded, crying, and walked out through the gate. It was cruel, maybe, the way any real consequence is cruel. But protecting him from it would only have hurt him worse. I sat down next to Gary on the porch. He handed me a glass of cold water. Neither of us said anything. We just watched the sun go down over the neighborhood, and for the first time in 6 weeks, the quiet finally felt like mine again. Feeling safe in your own home is priceless, and sometimes protecting it means making the hardest call of your life. If your mail starts disappearing, if someone gets a little too curious about your assets, don't wait. Trust the instinct. Don't let love make you careless with everything you spent a lifetime building. Thanks for staying till the end of Dad's real-life revenge. Protect your family, protect what's yours, and I'll see you in the next one.